Welcome to today's Explainer, historians. For all you Year 9 history students out there, grab your notebooks, because today you are serving as the jury on one of the absolute most controversial figures in American history. We're not just going to rattle off a bunch of dates here, we're diving deep into motives, extreme actions, and the wild reactions of a completely divided nation.
We're looking at the life and the seriously explosive actions of John Brown. By the end of this evidence file, you have to decide, was he a heroic martyr who struck a necessary blow for freedom, or a dangerous terrorist who unleashed a total nightmare of violence? It's a massive question historians have been arguing about for over a century, and today, the call is yours.
Here's our dossier for today. We'll be covering Meet John Brown, the path to violence, the case for terrorist, the case for hero, and finally, the verdict. Let's get to it.
Section 1. Meet John Brown, the vow. Let's open the file on the man himself and figure out what exactly drove him.
Okay, let's dive right in. To really get John Brown, we first need to lock down the term abolitionist. Basically, this is someone who wants to completely get rid of slavery. But listen, Brown wasn't just a guy writing polite letters to the editor. No way. He was deeply religious and believed with absolute, unwavering certainty that God had specifically chosen him to destroy slavery by literally any means necessary.
And that fire, it was lit incredibly early. His deep hatred for slavery actually started back in 1812. He was just 12 years old when he saw an enslaved boy, his own age, brutally beaten with an iron fireplace shovel. That single moment sparked an eternal war on slavery for him.
Now, his personal life is pretty chaotic. I mean, he fathered 20 children, struggled with money, and went completely bankrupt in 1842. But his mission? It never wavered. Fast forward to 1837, right after a pro-slavery mob murdered an anti-slavery journalist. Brown stood right up and publicly vowed to consecrate my life to the destruction of slavery.
Section 2. The path to violence, from peace to broadswords. Let's track how his methods escalated from peaceful resistance to extreme armed conflict.
Mapping out his timeline shows a really massive shift in tactics. Back in the 1840s, he actually used peaceful means quite successfully. He worked as a conductor on the Underground Railroad, helping enslaved people escape from places like Missouri all the way safely to Canada. But peaceful protests weren't ending slavery fast enough for him. So in 1851, he forms the League of Gileadites. This was an armed group created to physically fight off slave catchers. Then, as national tensions started boiling over into a mini-civil war in the Kansas Territory, Brown totally shifted gears, rushing headfirst into conflict zones with literal wagons full of weapons.
Which brings us to this shocking number, 5. In 1856, during the Bleeding Kansas conflict, Brown decided to take violent revenge for a pro-slavery attack on an abolitionist town. Under the cover of darkness, Brown and his men dragged 5 pro-slavery settlers right out of their cabins near Pottawatomie Creek and killed them with heavy, brutal broadswords. We're not talking about a battlefield skirmish here. It was a brutal, close-quarters massacre, and it absolutely shocked the nation.
The violence finally peaked on October 16, 1859. Brown launched a massive, armed raid on a federal weapons armory at Harper's Ferry, Virginia. He went in with just 21 men, 16 white and 5 black. The grand plan? Seize all the weapons and trigger a massive uprising of enslaved people. But things went terribly wrong. Within just 36 hours, they were totally surrounded by military forces. Most of his men, including 2 of his own sons, were killed or captured. John Brown was taken alive, which ultimately set the stage for the trial of the century.
Section 3. The case for terrorist, a nightmare of fear. We're now presenting the prosecution's case, the historical evidence arguing that John Brown was, in fact, a dangerous terrorist.
Let's look at the hard charges. Critics at the time pointed out that he completely abandoned the peaceful methods for outright bloodshed. And, the legal system agreed. He was tried and officially convicted by a court of law for incredibly serious crimes. We're talking murder, treason against the state of Virginia, and inciting a violent slave insurrection. For a lot of Southerners, his actions weren't heroic in the slightest. They revived a terrifying recurrent nightmare of bloody rebellions. He basically brought panic, death, and just deep, deep anger to the country.
To really grasp the outrage of the time, just listen to the Raleigh Register, a North Carolina newspaper. They blatantly called him a traitor, murderer, and thief, and a hardened criminal. They were absolutely furious, warning that if military forces hadn't stopped him and his sympathizers, blood would have been spilled everywhere, and the Union itself would have burst asunder. They saw him as an immediate, violent threat to their very lives and property.
But here's the crazy part. It wasn't just pro-slavery Southerners condemning his methods. Even the great abolitionist leader Frederick Douglass actually met with Brown right before the raid, and Douglass, he flatly refused to join him. He warned Brown that a direct attack on the federal government would turn the whole country against them, famously calling Harper's Ferry a deadly, perfect steel trap that Brown would literally never get out of alive.
Section 4. The Case for Hero, a Martyr for Freedom. Now, on the flip side, we present the defense. The historical evidence arguing that John Brown was a heroic martyr fighting for a completely just cause.
His supporters argued that you really have to look at his ultimate goal, not just the violence. He openly stated his only objective was to free enslaved people and fight a cruel, unjust system that was honestly already inherently violent itself. His supporters believed his drastic actions successfully shook up the nation, pretty much forcing them to finally confront the horrors of slavery they'd been ignoring for so long. He truly believed he was following God's law to treat others the way he wanted to be treated, and he proved his dedication by sacrificing everything, his finances, his own life, and even the lives of his children, just to stand up for the poor and mistreated.
And look at this powerful reaction from the North. Thousands praised his bravery. On the exact day he was executed, funeral bells tolled across northern cities. At his grave, abolitionist Wendell Phillips gave this deeply passionate eulogy, calling Brown a marvelous old man with an iron heart and devoted faith. Phillips actually made an incredible prediction here. He claimed that by sacrificing his life, Brown had actually loosened the roots of the slave system, and that his martyrdom would inspire 1 million hearts to finally end slavery once and for all.
So arguably the most crucial point in the defense comes from the man himself. In his incredibly powerful final speech right before his execution, Brown claimed he never actually intended murder or treason, but only to free the slaves. He told the court that if he had fought on behalf of the rich and powerful, he would have been rewarded. But because he fought on behalf of, quote, God's despised poor, he was being killed for it. He ended by declaring that if he must mingle his blood with the blood of millions whose rights were disregarded by wicked and cruel acts, then, quote, so let it be done. He accepted his death entirely.
Section 5. The verdict? You decide. The evidence has been presented, the timeline established, and the historical arguments made. Now it's time for the jury's summation. Weigh these facts side by side, Year 9s. On one hand, you have a man who successfully used peaceful means to rescue people, believed in profound equality, sacrificed his life for the oppressed, and was hailed as a martyr who helped spark the end of slavery. But on the exact same page, on the other hand, you have a man legally convicted of treason, who literally hacked unarmed men to death with broadswords, who terrified everyday citizens, and whose violent methods were condemned even by those who agreed with his anti-slavery goals. You are the historian. We've gone through the whole dossier, from the shovel incident at age 12 all the way to the gallows in Virginia. So look at your notes, weigh the sources, and cast your vote. Do the ends justify the means? Was John Brown a hero or a terrorist? I'm going to leave that to you to decide. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep digging into the past.